This is James Baldwin, born in Harlem, 1924, the first of 9 children, the son of a minister. Occupation today, writer.
And what a writer. James Baldwin has written about the love and the hate that flow between the polarities of man and woman, black and white, of man and man, with a power that commands. To know about America today, about race in America, about sexuality in America, about passion and anguish in America, I think you must read James Baldwin.
Giovanni's Room, Go Tell It on the Mountain, Notes of a Native Son are some of the books that 10 years in Paris drew from James Baldwin. About a decade ago, he returned home to get closer to the black man's struggle in America. Today, he seems bent on escalating that war in the United States.
When I walked in here, you said, what are we going to talk about? And I said, you know, the usual but important things. You kind of said, A, that was depressing, and B, you weren't sure it was worthwhile.
Well, there are days when you feel that way, you know. One gets tired of talking because no one's listening, you know. It's inevitable one would feel that, you know. And a lot of black people seem to be turned away from any effort at any kind of dialogue, and from the bottom of my heart, I really cannot blame them, because one gets weary of trying to explain to people who don't want to hear it the dangers which you and they are running. One gets weary of trying to convey an experience which is really in some sense antithetical to the American, to the Western pretensions. One gets weary of trying to confront the people with the necessity of assessing their own history, which is what has brought us to this place. And if people don't want to do it, you finally say, well, you know, I don't care what you're going to do, I know what I'm going to do.
And that's where we're at now?
That's where many of us are at, yes.
So it's likelier to get worse than it is to get better.
We've been saying that for years. If I may say so, I did write a book called The Fire Next Time, which means that people bought, which obviously nobody read. We'll have to get worse, you know, since no real action has been taken. And years pass very quickly. A boy who was 15 is presently 30. Has a kid 10. And not only is he aware of what has happened to him in his 30 years, but he's watching it happen to his kid. And as far as he can tell, it's going to go on and on forever, just like that, with white people, various white people weeping about it. Well, that's unacceptable. Simply.
A lot of people come along and say, I've been born into this thing. You know, I don't actively support it, I'm not sure I like it. And you still use that generic you, so that a very liberal response is, this is grossly unfair to me as an individual.
I'm not trying to be unfair, but, you know, it's, we were all born into it. And, you know, I know many people actively don't support it. You know, I'm not condemning you, in fact, any more than I'm condemning me. My point is, you know, my point is simply that since we were born into it, and since it manages both of us alike, there's something we have to take some responsibility for doing something about it. I'm not really talking in racial terms either. You know, one of the delusions of the century is that this is a race war, but it's not. It's the mask for, in this country, for a kind of civil war. And in the world, it's, you know, it's the mask for the old war between poverty and privilege. And it's complicated here by the fact that really when one's living through, I think one's living through the end of a doctrine, you know, the doctrine of white supremacy. We are living through the last days of the white Christian European dominance. What is coming after, I have no idea, and I'm not at all persuaded that what comes after is going to be any better. But doctrines have their day, and this doctrine has had its day. That is what it comes to. Of course, the shape of the future, you know, will be something for our grandchildren to deal with, because we will, you know, it'll be a long time working out. But a great deal, I think, does depend on what we do now. I think we could minimize some of the damage, minimize some of the bloodshed, minimize some of the confusion.
So if we're talking about possible solutions to a condition of life in 1968, it's not so much what I can do as a white man, But what I can do.
Yes, precisely. Yes. What we can do, you know, to save something which we have in common, to redeem something which is our common humanity, which is all I'm ever really talking about. And it's true I'm talking about it from a very particular vantage point, because I would know more about black boys and girls on the streets and in jail than you would, because I'm one of those boys. You know, that's where I come from. I know what's happened to me, and I know what's happened to them. But that also means that I know, since I know that, I know something which you don't face, you know, really, about what's happening to you, because it's being done in your name, you know. Sometimes actively, you know, with your consent. Most often, without your consent and even without your knowledge, but it is happening every day. And whether or not you know it, you know, one doesn't know what kind of hurricane is building up in the east or the west right now, but nevertheless it's building. And one day it hits. And all I'm talking about then is, you know, is the effort to be conscious, to at least know what it is that hit you. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. I guess at the same time, I'm also wondering how you relate now to some of the people who are probably standing over your right or left shoulder, you know, some of the other people in the civil rights movement, or black nationalists, Black Panthers, Stokely.
There's nothing really to be said about Stokely. You know, I've known Stokely for a very long time. Everyone overlooks the fact that Stokely was, you know, was a very, very, very long time walking up and down dusty highways in the Deep South, trying to get people to vote. And he was about 15 or 16, getting his head whipped, being thrown in and out of jail, like all those kids for all those years. And the day would have to come. And everybody knew it. Martin knew it. When the breaking point would be reached. How many more chain gangs? How many more beatings? How many more beatings with chains? How much indifference? How much brutality do you expect people to be able to take? After all that marching and all that pain and all that damage, the country really did nothing, you know, except pass token laws and bills. But nothing changed. And then you drag in this really rather wretched farce of an election, which is, you know, and both parties have been, you know, treated black people in this country with the most monumental contempt. What in the world did they expect?
So when you're finished with the kind of analysis which really makes you almost into a good black man, because you're not scaring me or the audience that's going to watch this, you still have to decide what you're going to do, and what you're going to do may be uncomfortable for us.
It will certainly be uncomfortable for you as long as you pretend that I'm not going to do it. I have a 10-month nephew, 6-month old nephew upstairs. And finally, when the chips are down, I don't care what you do at all. But I'm not going to let you do anything to him. I'm not going to let him grow up the way I grew up. And if it means doing something to you, I will not contend to do it. You can stand in my way, but you're not going to stand in his. The party's over.